and welcome to another episode of Our Point of View Talk Show. How's everyone doing?
Hey guys.
Hi, good evening.
Well, first what we're going to do, we're going to introduce our hosts. We have Jen. Hey, Jen.
Hey, good to see you guys. Thank you guys so much for joining us.
Hey, Cap. You're muted.
You're
Unmute yourself.
muted.
Captain, unmute yourself.
There you go.
Here we go. Hello, everybody.
Hey, Cap.
And then we have our state representative, Derek Jackson of District 64, who is also our political commentary. Hey, Derek. Derek, where'd you go?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. How are you?
I'm here. You know, I'm on location again. Hold on, let me find some light. Hold on. Let me find some light. You know, we try to bring it to you real during this early voting season that we are in. Hold on, let me find some light here.
Well, once you get your light, tell us a little bit about what's going on with the early voting.
Absolutely. Can you see me?
I can see you now.
There he is.
Yes. All right. Hey, listen, early voting is still underway, and it started December 14th all the way through December 31st. And we're so excited. When I say we're excited. The reason why we're so excited is because right now, nearly 1.6 million Georgians have cast their vote. 1.6 million. Now, you're probably saying, well, why is that such a big number? Because this time during the general election, November 3rd, we were at 1.9 million. And so that's huge when you start talking about early voting, where they thought that no one was going to turn out and vote. So right now we're at 1.6 million, 1 million in-person vote, and 600,000 mail-in ballots. And so that's significant. Of that, here's some breaking news: nearly 70,000 Georgians who did not vote on November were registered and they're voting. 70,000. Wow. So that's 70,000 new voters. Yes.
That's awesome.
So we're excited. Right now, from a Democratic standpoint, it's 44% and Republican 41%. So it's still a tight race. I still strongly encourage everyone to get out and vote. Let your voice be heard.
Right.
January 5th is the election day for the runoff.
Sounds good. Well, thank you so much for that update. And we're going to do that update every week until the actual election, so we can find out what's going on out there. But now we're going to go ahead and introduce our guests. And as you all know, today we're talking about coronavirus vaccine. So we have with us first, we have Ms. She's actually a registered nurse. Is that correct? Meady Bardinelli?
Yes.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about you and welcome to Our Point of View Talk Show.
Thank you, Jacqueline and Representative Jackson, for having me on this evening. I am so excited. I am Meady Bardinelli. I currently live and reside for the past 25 plus years in Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, where a lot of stuff is happening. But I originally hail from the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, graduate of Howard University. Shout out to my fellow colleague right there, Kenyatta. Super excited, my fellow Bison sister. I had the distinct honor and privilege to serve as the chair of the District of Columbia's Board of Nursing, which is a legislative body that regulates nursing practice in the DC area for over 27,000 registered nurses licensed in practice in the district. Additionally, I am a nursing director at one of our local medical facilities. And those of you that are attorneys or know that I have a little disclaimer that my speaking this evening is not on behalf of the DC Board of Nursing or where I work. If those of you that are watching know me, these are my own personal views and my opportunity to share with you, Jacqueline and Representative Jackson and my other esteemed colleagues. Additionally, I have the distinct honor, I think Representative Jackson and I spoke about this. I am a recent 2020 member of the Presidential Electoral College. So I had the blessed opportunity this past Monday to serve as one of the 3 members to actually cast their ballot on behalf of the amazing Joe Biden and Senator Kamala Harris to serve as our president and vice president-elect. Super excited to share with you this evening, and I'm glad. And I also want to share, I'm a recent COVID-19 recipient of the vaccine as of this morning. So Representative Jackson was calling me literally as I was in the middle of signing my papers and get my shot. So I'm alive. I only have 1 head, 2 eyes. So we'll see what happens.
Wonderful.
That's good. Well,
That's
thank you so much
wonderful.
for joining us. And
Yes,
then next
ma'am.
we have Dr. Kay Stevens. Dr.
Yeah.
Stevens, welcome to our Point of View Talk Show. Tell us a little bit about you, please.
Thank you for having me. I'm Dr. Kenyatta Stevens, but I am affectionately known as Dr. K because I am an infectious disease epidemiologist with a background in molecular biology and molecular genetics. I'm a Howard grad as well. And
Okay, HBCU.
Oh, that's HU in the house. HU in the house.
absolutely.
No.
And
Really, Cap.
I've done cancer research at Emory University School of Medicine, and I've worked on various projects at CDC, and I've traveled the world setting up disease surveillance systems in developing countries. And I am also an adjunct professor of public health for master's programs at 2 universities. So that's where the Dr. K comes, because my students they affectionately call me Dr. K. So it stuck, y'all. So that's where I am. So I'm glad to be here and discuss my point of view.
Well, thank you so very much for being with us. Now, Midi, you said you already got the vaccine.
Yes, ma'am.
And Dr. K, you're going to wait for a while?
Yes, I am waiting. I had the opportunity to sit on the EUA authorization calls with both vaccine companies and FDA. And so with my background in molecular biology and just being an epidemiologist, I have decided to wait because for the vote, they only voted on if the benefits outweigh the risk. That was the vote for the EUA. They didn't consider a lot of other things. And so I decided to wait. I'm going to wait for a few iterations. This is still an experimental vaccine. It's not an approved drug. So I'm praying for my fellow Bison Meaty. I'm just kidding, because the first dose that's everyone now has received that has gotten the vaccine has received the first dose. But according to both companies, the second dose is where you actually will see more of the reactions. They didn't want to call them side effects, but their reactions. So like the high fever, muscle aches and pains, they said you will most likely have to take a day off from work. So that's why they're staggering with the hospital staff. Like everybody in the ED is not going to get the second dose at the same time, because they'll more likely will have to take a day off. And so the reactions will actually last about 72 hours. So I'll just wait.
Let's see what happens.
See what happens. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So Midi, why did you decide to take it?
I decided to take it because I work in an acute care setting. I actually take care of COVID positive patients every day. I think Dr. K made the perfect analogy for me. She and I both work in different environments. And so I am actively caring for patients that have the virus. And so for me, the risk benefit is that understanding. And after I did a little bit of research, realizing that it wasn't actually infecting me with the virus, but using the mRNA, really trying to work on the protein. And I agree with her. Listen, I administer medications every day that are approved by the FDA, and I have seen very bad negative outcomes, patients put in the permanent liver failure or kidney failure. For me, however, I've also had nursing colleagues I know that have passed away. I've had of my team, I've had at least 6 people test positive. I personally know now, I think 4 persons who have passed away from COVID. And I looked at the numbers again, because at least I know the CDC updates them after 5. Today, Jacqueline, there's 18,170,662 persons that have COVID. And within the last 24 hours, 195,000 cases. I mean, this is unfathomable for me. And additionally, 321,000 individuals have passed away. And in the last 24 hours, 3,165 American citizens have passed. So for me, it is a risk benefit. And it is, as she just eloquently indicated, even though I'm not contradicting her, but she's right. If you're working in an acute care setting, you do kind of have to figure out what is your risk benefit. And as an acute care practitioner, you don't know what people have when they're coming in until they're tested. And quite frankly, the PCR testing still has a lot of false negatives. You can get the blood test. The blood test, that test is for antibodies. That serology, as she clearly knows, way better than I do, because I'm not an epidemiologist, but even that serology is only noted once the individuals have started to produce antibodies. And that doesn't just happen in, a week. That takes a couple of weeks, sometimes months, for you to even determine if you have antibodies to something. So in the interim, here I am caring for patients. And so for me, if Dr. Kizzy Corbett is working on it, Dr. Fauci, who I believe, I think is doing a yeoman's job trying to share the adequate information as best as he can. For me, it was a not a cost, but a risk benefit for that in my health.
Okay. Wow.
And I think that raises a very good point when you think about, as a legislator, one of the things that we always try to do from a public health, public safety standpoint, and that is, how do we mitigate this situation? How do we, in this particular case, and we were talking about this during our meeting, Jacqueline, that there are 4 phases, right? And we have to identify, based on the number of vaccination shots that are available. And correct me if I'm wrong, Meady or Dr. K, that in order for us to get ahead of this, 75% of our population need to be vaccinated, right? And we know this because we had to deal with smallpox, we had to deal with measles, mumps, and other reasons why we had to get, vaccination shots, when it was appropriate when we were infants. And so there's part of, as a legislator, it's always great to allow subject matter experts like Meady and Dr. K to share with our audience, our point of view audience, from that health perspective. And it's up to individuals like myself to make sure that they have the resources to do their job, right? I think what ended up happening during this coronavirus and the vaccination, it became politicized, right? Even the mask, wearing the mask became politicized, right? We don't politicize wearing the seatbelts. We just made it a law, right? And they're fine. Wearing a mask is designed to help healthcare professionals like Meady and Dr. K do their job. If not, we're going to end up like California, where we don't have enough beds, ICU beds, and staffing and resources available to curve or change the curvature of these numbers that Meady shared with us this evening. So that's why it's a delicate balance when you start talking about public health and what we need to do to mitigate the situation and who should get these types of vaccination shots first.
And if I can add, Representative Jackson,
go from that perspective.
If one thing I can add, Representative Jackson, to your point that you just made, and I think also on top of
Did she freeze?
I think she did.
Did we lose Meady?
Freeze for me.
my second dose, as she said, I am nervous about what's going to happen that next day and how I'm going to feel. However, For the last 9 months, I have been working in a scenario, living in a place where people are still, as you just indicated, politicizing wearing a mask. So if we all could agree to do what we should do, and I hate to use the word mandate, but if it was a mandate to wear the mask, then maybe we could wait a little bit longer. Maybe we could let Dr. Cañeda and all the other, Dr. Fauci and others have a little more time. But unfortunately, the general public, quite frankly, has not abided by that. So I'm not going to put myself at risk because my health is now based off of the person that I'm walking next to. I just came from the grocery store before I got on this call. I'm a registered nurse and the man's mask was down here. And I said, hey, sir, if you don't mind, can you pull up your mask? And I just got, scoffed, I thought he was going to kill me the way he looked at me. And it was just, I was very kind and pleasant. I said, I'm sorry, I'm a nurse. I just want to make sure, we're all protecting ourselves. And he was like, well, whatever, it doesn't really matter. That was his response. So my point is, I cannot allow that to impact my health. And so if there is something out there that might help me protect myself, as you indicated, I'm going to do that.
Yes, and just to piggyback off Meaty, so my situation is different because I get to work from home. So technically I'm still sheltering in place. So I just want to make that, known. And so what I want the public to know is that even if we reach herd immunity status by 75% of the population being vaccinated, with the amount of vaccines that are available now, that's not going to happen probably until 2022. And
Correct.
so, because right now we're still in phase 1 of the vaccine rollout, and that's just like the healthcare practitioners, and there's a shortage of vaccines right now. They haven't even received the second dose to have the full effect of the vaccine. And so after the healthcare practitioners, then it's other essential workers that are next in line. So, and then after the essential workers, then it's those with high risk medical conditions. And then the fourth group that have been identified are adults that are 65 and over.
So Dr. K, and I feel like you and I can honestly, I feel like we just kind of took over this whole conversation, but really quick to put it in, but let me put it in
We're here to learn.
Washington, D.C. has 750,000 residents just in the district of alone. I want to repeat that I do not speak on behalf of where I work for anyone that knows me, but here are the numbers. Last week, I'm not speaking of Moderna because Moderna just happened on Monday. Last week, when Pfizer released the first vaccinations that we all watched on TV, which was great, Washington, D.C. only received 6,825 doses. 6,825 doses. And of that 6,825 doses, what I can share is that there's 5 or 6 major hospitals in the District of Columbia. My own hospital where I work has over 2,000 plus nurses. So the first dose that the whole entire city of DC received is not even enough to cover every single person at one hospital. Okay. And then the second piece of what you just said, Dr. K, and you made the perfect point, is this: even in the hospital, I was not the first person. I just got mine today. We had the vaccine since last week. It is because we had to still prioritize even within the hospitals, the ER physicians, the anesthesiologists, the respiratory therapists who are doing aerosolized treatments, the security officers, the people that are at the front door because you don't know what's coming in, the individuals who are working at the clinic areas because, again, the public is coming in. Where I personally work as an inpatient setting, so in theory, the patients before I see them should be tested. So there is even a wait within that scenario. So just think about that. There's 700,000 persons in DC, and we only received 6,000 doses. And we just got a second shipment of Pfizer, I believe, in the district about a day and a half ago. And so again, you are so correct, Dr. Cañada, that people need to understand that even if we are able and open it up to everyone, the entire country will not be vaccinated well until after the summer months. And to your point, then there's another, not quite a month, 3 weeks or so that you have to keep waiting for your second dose before you fully get the full impact and effect of the vaccine. So again, people need to look at that. You all know, Representative Jackson knows this, DC is not a state, unfortunately. And so, however, Of the 26,000 plus nurses that I tell you that I actually represent as chair of the Board of Nursing, only 2,000 of them are DC residents, which means the majority of those other persons of our workforce, because the vaccine is disseminated based on population, not on the workforce. And so if the population of DC is small, we only got 6,000, but our neighbors, Maryland and Virginia, received much more. I'm grateful that our mayor, Muriel Bowser, who I'm sure everybody knows, our first Black Lives Matter, shout out to her, and our Department of Health director actually had to fight to say, hey, Maryland, hey, Virginia, your residents work in DC. So our DC facilities are vaccinating your residents. So you need to come up off of some of your vaccines to
Right.
give us more, because you have to vaccinate your actual residents. So there's so much that is going behind what is happening that people don't know. So at the end of the day, and again, I'm sure, sorry, Jacqueline, Kenyatta and I could probably go back and forth and talk volleyball, this whole thing. People need to make the best decision for yourself. Call your doctor, your nurse practitioner, your physician assistant, whomever. Figure out what your comorbidities are, figure out what your risk is. As she said, if you're at home and you don't have to take it, then don't take it. If you're able to socially distance appropriately and you want to wait, that's fine. But if you're out there every day, putting yourself at risk, talk to your physician and I'm not here to tell you, my only advice is make the best decision for yourself. Go to cdc.gov, go to the FDA, read the information for yourself. I am not an epidemiologist or a microbiologist. She is. But what I do know is that patients are dying every single day and the numbers are continuing to increase. And Black and brown individuals, and I agree with my sister, my fellow Bison sister particularly, is that we do have to trust the science. But at the same point, Black and brown individuals cannot continue to buy into conspiracy theories. People even today have said to me, but there's some microchip, Dr. K, I'm like, what are you talking about? There might be something going on with the cell, but trust me, there's no microchips. Yes, Tuskegee happened, but there are people like Dr. Kenyatta who knows there are so many IRB review boards. There's so many things that take place before you can even actually do a survey if you're working on your PhD. You can't just go out and give medications. So my only, and I'm probably promise you I'll be quiet, but my plea is do not buy into 10 seconds of MSNBC, CNN, Fox News. Don't go to even this, quite frankly. I'm grateful for this opportunity to share. Call your doctor. Don't listen to me because I don't know your comorbidities. Call your physician and make the best choice for yourself and your family.
Okay, well, I have a question.
That's awesome.
Go ahead.
Now, the vaccine, it took what, maybe 2 or 3 months for it to actually get to this point? I mean, well, this all started back in January? Okay, so they started working on the vaccine back then? Is that what it is? And we've come up to, I'm sorry?
So no, they actually started working, Pfizer started working on the vaccine like around maybe March, April. Moderna has been working on the mRNA therapeutic for 8 years. They don't have, so the difference between Pfizer and Moderna, Pfizer has over 100 drugs on the market. Moderna has none. So this is Moderna's first drug on the market, which is this vaccine. So they've tried 8 mRNA therapeutics before this one, but this one has only been the quote unquote successful one. And the reason why I say that is because that was when I sat on that FDA call where they were basically presenting their case for EUA authorization. That question was asked. You've had 8 prior to this one. What makes you think this one will work?
So they had 8 vaccines for the coronavirus they were working on?
No. Just the mRNA vaccine, like therapeutic. It wasn't a vaccine. They were more like an mRNA based drug or medicine, or we call it therapeutic. And they use it in smaller populations, but the effectiveness just wasn't there for mass distribution, if you will. So this is their first mRNA therapeutic or vaccine that has been successful. So this is like their 9th one. And this is the one that has received EUA authorization.
And this is the one for the coronavirus?
Yes.
Okay, so my question about it is, okay, we've had HIV for 20 plus years and no one's come up with a vaccine for that. They have a pill that helps you to live with it, but all of a sudden we have coronavirus and within a year's time, we have a vaccine for it. I'm not understanding that. How
So-
is that working?
So let me just share, there's variations of different strands, and I'm sure Dr. K can speak about that. And so there's things that are happening in cancer. There's cancer research that's been going on forever, and we
Right.
still don't have a vaccine. It just really depends. And so that's why Dr. Corbett, the now infamous young Black woman who was working, people like her and Dr. K are already working on stuff. Some things happen sooner than others. This, what is happening, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. K, is that COVID-19 is a little bit different, but there are similar strands because we already had SARS, right? You kind of already have the flu. So you kind of have these respiratory like symptom illnesses and diseases that they then continue to study. And so now they also realize, even though yes, cancer kills many people, I don't think that you have 2,000 people every single day. I don't know the answer. I don't have the exact number, but I'm saying I think because it's so contagious. So this is a little bit different than HIV and other things where you have to come in contact. It has to be some type of intentionality before you get those other type of disease processes. Whereas this is more communicable and it impacts the public health in such a way as we all know and seen what took place in New York City. So I think that is the differentiation when people like Dr. K and Dr. Fauci and others that are out there working in virology and immunology, where they're trying to work and figure it out what happens. It's no different than, all hands on deck when there's one big thing that is happening. And so respiratory illnesses like this, the problem is that they have been working on it, but again, it's now become a public health issue because it was so easily contracted.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
that would
Okay,
be this.
circle back to you.
It seemed like that would be the same with the HIV. What is the difference?
But think about that, Jacqueline. HIV is different. I won't get HIV unless I actually come in contact with somebody's blood or bodily fluids or I have unprotected sex. So they know that as a fact. So my risk factor of getting HIV is less likely unless I'm just out, unless those things happen. You can get COVID from just standing behind somebody in a grocery store breathing, or getting in a car with the cab driver, which is completely different than, HIV or cancer. You know what I mean? So I think that's a variation that folks need to understand.
so just how this happened. HIV is an epidemic, so it's pretty much basically, as far as like the people that it's affecting are localized. So that's like the epidemic. But because COVID is a pandemic and it's a global spread, they it's called Operation Warp Speed. And so basically they poured a lot of money in it, more money than any other disease.
Right.
So it got all the money. They were able to collaborate on a global level with other scientists, which is what's not happening with the other diseases. And then also so the government already put the money into the companies for the research, and because the vaccines were basically already in production and ready to go out 2 or 3 days after they received FDA approval.
So let me ask you this. Does all this warp speed work? Has that set a precedence for the science community to say to us that, okay, we know that in the past, there's been some time, 5-10 years, for research, for studies, to do cross-checking to make sure that we aren't growing things that we should grow, or serious issues.
Right.
Does it cause sterility in men? Does it cause increased likelihood of hysterectomies in women? Does it cause autism in unborn children? Things like that. But now that everything's been pushed forward so fast, is that setting a precedence to say, hey, look, y'all don't have to take so long now? Is it still a money thing? Is it still a money thing?
And so what people don't understand is this is not an approved drug. Like, again, we don't know what the vaccine, what the clinical implications can be in the long run.
Okay.
So, which is why EUA is emergency use authorization. Now, if there were probably 15 people to die from, and this is theoretical, people, I'm not not putting that out there, but if 15 people actually died from receiving the vaccine next week, the FDA could revoke authorization. No one will get a vaccine because it's not approved.
And we
Yeah.
are being told, Dr. K, that we're going to be followed for up to 2 years. So everyone
Right.
who is getting the vaccine, you will
Yeah.
be followed for any side effects for 2 years.
So
Right.
it's still an ongoing study. And for those who follow me on social media, that was one of the things that I mentioned in my video, that this is still an ongoing study because it's experimental. And so it's actually easier to follow healthcare professionals because they know their body. So if something, doesn't feel right or off, they're like, okay, well, let me get checked out. Whereas, sometimes the average person will go days and say, okay, I wasn't feeling right, but, I just didn't know, what this was. So it kind of works twofold. There were some questions about unblinding because it was a double-blind study for Pfizer and Moderna. And so if you were in the placebo group and you are a healthcare practitioner, there were some questions with that because, do they unblind you and give you the vaccine? And so one company said no, one company said yes. So, there are so many ethical implications with this as well. So, I say find your source of truth. Your fact, the place where you go for your facts. You can't let social media drive this pandemic. And so just get the facts and make the choices for yourself.
And if I may add, and correct me if I'm wrong, Meaty and Dr. K, the 2 points that I think we should really, for our audience sake, really need to drill down on. And I know a lot of folks always in these types of conversations will say, well, what about the Tuskegee experiment, right? Well, this is not 1932. We have a lot of protocols, internal review boards and things of that nature, and process that the government, even the government, can't break all that bureaucracy and that red tape. So that's the first point. You can't take something like the Tuskegee experiment and try to bring that forward here to equate it on how we're dealing with the coronavirus. That's point number one. Point number two, I think, is even more essential to bring more texture to this conversation. And that is Operation Warp Speed is unrealistic because we can't do this for every single virus, bacteria. I mean, we study contagions all the time. We go down to the Congo River and we study these different bacteria and we try to get ahead of it. I mean, for our audience sake, President Obama had 3 of these that could have very well ended up in a very pandemic kind of way, right? Yep. Ebola is still an issue, but we know how to deal with it. We're providing aid to those African countries that are dealing with Ebola, right? It still exists. H1N1, swine flu. And so all these things, we have knowledge. God gave us the ability to have knowledge and capabilities to get ahead of some of these types of potential pandemics. What we need to do is educate our audience, educate society, and not let them be fearful because we're all vaccinated with something, right? Mumps, measles, polio. I mean, right? You have to be vaccinated. Our tempo can only fight off what it can to a certain degree, unassisted. And so when you have subject matter experts like Meaty, like Dr. K and Dr. Fauci, as an elected official, they need to have the microphone because they are better suited to educate our audience and our citizens so we don't politicize something as taking a shot. Just like Bayer aspirin can be bad if you take too much Bayer aspirins. Tylenol can be bad if you take too much Tylenol, right? Anything could be bad. There's always going to be side effects because our bodies are all different, right? It's just like our hands, our fingers on the hand. The question is, what's your risk-benefit trade-off? Because it's not just their places of employment like Meaty and Dr. K. They also have families. They also have loved ones. right? And so I would like to think that if and this is for all the conspiracy theorists out there, we're not going to give this shot to all of our subject matter experts first and kill them, and then who's going to be left to take care of us, right? You still have heart attacks.
Please
You
say
still,
that again, Dr. Jackson.
right? You still have babies being born. You still have, bumps and bruises. And so I just think we gotta look at what's your source, right? Read it for yourself. I think Meady and Dr. Kate has said that many times. Read it for yourself, and in the end, right? And I think someone said it best. When you look at all the data, the 44,000 of individuals that have been studied, 180,000 tests, the efficacy, I didn't even know what efficacy was until now, right? I'm so smart about efficacy now, right? So this is not a new process, right? Jacqueline, we have to look at this and say, what is new and what is not? We've been doing this. The question is, we don't have the money and the resources to drill down every potential pandemic like we have this time. That's the reason why Operation Warp Speed is I think it's a one-off.
Well, my question would be, why are they giving out a vaccine that's not FDA approved yet? Why? What is the rush? What is the rush?
Folks dying.
Well, Jacqueline, the rush is the numbers that I shared with you. The rush is within the last 24 hours, 3,000 people have died from a respiratory droplet type borne illness, a respiratory airborne illness. That's why. And so people aren't wearing their masks. So they are coming up with something to try to mitigate the risk of people continuing to die, period.
But also, either you or Dr. K stated that if 15 people who already received this vaccination, if 15 people die, then they're going to pull it.
Well, let's be clear. Well, she can speak for herself. What she was saying is, if there's, and probably would take more than 15 people, quite frankly, because so far 5 people have already died. In the trials, 5 people have died. However, unless, and this Meady can't even speak to this, unless you're Dr. K or Fauci, those people, even that passed away, you have to look at what are their comorbidities? What is their past medical history? What was their activity? What happened? So it's not just when you do, anytime somebody dies, you have to look at their morbidity and mortality, not just because of the medication. But 5 people have already died from the vaccine, that have received the vaccine, have already died. And they did not necessarily attribute it 150% directly to the vaccine, but it was definitely a contributing factor. And me nor Dr. K, I'm sure even tonight, can't tell you why, because we don't have those medical records to explain that. What she is indicating is that even, and I'm sure it'll be more than 15 people, but if there's a significant number of people that are having a negative adverse event, severe rather, because you have adverse events and then there's different tiers of risks, right? There's risks that kill you. Like right now, my arm feels, it's a little sore, but it's no sore than what it is when I get any injection. That right there is considered an adverse event, so to speak, because I'm having a reaction to the vaccine, but that's to be expected. But if I'm dying and my arm turns black and blue and my arm, that's completely different. The point is, it is approved, but what she's saying is that it's kind of a play on semantics, that because they obviously approved it to give us a drug, it's still under investigation. Okay. And you can watch, if you watch any TV show, you have, all of us have seen those things that pop up that say, hey, if you took ABCD drug, call so-and-so law firm because we are now putting in a class action lawsuit. Right. That happens every single day. The drugs that FDA have approved for 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years, the drug is now on the market. And for whatever reason, there are now negative adverse events. And they now say, hey, maybe something is wrong. Let's bring it back. Nobody, and Dr. Representative Jackson and I laughed about this the other day. No one had a complaint with Viagra. Viagra was initially produced by Pfizer as an antihypertensive for blood pressure. Men, however, had a wonderful reaction to Viagra. Because of that wonderful reaction, they switched indications. So Viagra is no longer given as an antihypertensive. It is given as a medication to help the male libido. And so if that is the case, that was a negative reaction after having taken the drug.
Yeah.
People died from Viagra because the men were like, oh shoot, this is the best thing since sliced bread. Pop in 2 and 3 of them. And those people died. But all joking aside, those men passed away because they also didn't realize they were dropping their blood pressure so low, right, Dr. K? To the point where they then passed out and died in the middle of having this wonderful experience. And so therefore you have to, again, it's funny, but it's true. We have to look at the cost risk benefit. Again, I am not here to tell you anyone to take it. I am telling you why I chose to do so. People are dying, and we cannot depend on people that wear a simple thing as a mask. We can't depend on people to Christmas is in 2 days. Some crazy family is going to still have 20 or 30 people gathering at their house. They're going to go and get tested today and think that they're fine, not realizing that that nasal swab PCR testing does not necessarily qualify for you to have a clean bill of health to go and hang out with your family in 2 days, because Dr. K can speak to that as soon as I'm done. If you don't mind, Dr. K, put a pin on that for me, how long it takes for those cells and stuff to develop those symptoms, okay? So people need to understand that. So because of that, period, people are dying and Americans have become pandemic fatigued. Well, guess what? You can either be fatigued or you can be dead. You can be fatigued or you can be on a ventilator. You can be fatigued or you can be in the hospital. And I, quite frankly, am more concerned, if I can be very honest, my truth is, what about the indications of individuals who have not gone to receive medical treatment for other things that Black and brown people should be seeing already, that we already have a disproportionate of inequity and inequality on? What about the heart disease? What about the kidney disease? What about the cancer? What about the women that didn't get mammograms? Black women die more from from breast cancer, not because we have a genetic disposition. It's because by the time we get our mammogram, it's so far along, therefore our mortality rate has decreased. Our white sisters actually get breast cancer more than us, but they're getting their breast cancer acknowledged at stage 1 and stage 2. We don't get it acknowledged till stage 3 and 4. And by that point, the prognosis is bad. So what about those women that did not go and get their mammograms done? What about my Black brothers like Representative Jackson and Captain Jackson, who haven't gone and got their colonoscopies done because men don't want to get that done, or got their prostate checked? And Black men die more from that. So quite frankly, the narrative needs to be, keep your hind part in the house, reduce hanging out, let Dr. K and everybody else do whatever the heck they need to do. And then maybe you won't have to have all these 50 million questions and conspiracy theories about this vaccine. But because we Americans aren't doing that, we are dying every single week. I just had Dr. Melissa Clark. She's a physician here in the district area. She is on the Blacks Against COVID Coalition here in DC, and reported with her work, 50,000 Blacks are getting COVID every week. 50,000. Wow. 50,000. And 1,000 of the people that are dying a week are Black and brown folks. So you couple that and layer that and cake that on top of everything else, on top of the George Floyd, on top of the Breonna Taylors, on top of everything else that's happening. And we haven't even begun to talk about our mental health. So long story short, yes, this conversation is about COVID, but it should be about our health in general. And as Representative Jackson said, stop pontificating and everything else about it. Call your doctor, ask them the question, and make an informed decision, period.
Well, and that was my question too, just to dial it back one, about the brothers and the Viagra. There's some brothers that
I had to put it out there.
It was some brothers that really couldn't come out of that for a few hours. They did their thing, but they can't even put the pants on because they're dealing with that. So, but back to what Jack was saying, he said that the folks behind the science need to and should have the mic. But typically in those types of conversations, there's usually a mic out there that's with the people, because the people have legitimate concerns. Because just being real, we aren't necessarily the most prioritized people. I know that that's a fact.
That's a fact. That's not that's a fact.
We're the most affected and the least educated in our own health.
Yeah.
These hospital closures that have happened down in South Georgia
Yes.
they've put all people or all women, if you're talking about women's issues, out of place. That's Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, who's ever down there is suffering because those hospitals are closing. But
COVID-19 has become an equalizer for the social economic issues, and people need to realize that. Even our white brothers and sisters, particularly our poor white brothers and sisters, need to recognize this is not just about Black folks. This is about all of us.
That's right.
The
That's
thing
right.
is, they drive the message that only Black and brown people are suffering. So when it comes to health issues, when it comes to reaching out to your state representative and your senators about issues that affect your community, they don't want to say anything, or they don't want to support because they think it doesn't affect them, and it does.
And they're the ones who aren't wearing a mask.
Wearing a mask, that's right.
Right. So we have legitimate concerns, and like you said, God bless you all for having this esteemed panel of professionals. I mean, you got a scientist on one end, you have someone from nursing from the healthcare facility on the other, you got a legislative point of view. I'm a firefighter, so I'm on the front lines, and
Jen's a flight attendant.
Jen is watching it all from the 30,000 level. It's like, this is something a little different.
Stays masked.
I have a question. Even though I'm a panelist, I want to know, what would Jen do and how would she feel? I didn't know she was a flight attendant, and her air is all recycled.
Right.
And there's people who have, what I'm told, had to actually say to people, get off the plane, because people weren't wearing their masks. What would you do, Jen? I mean, think about that. So that's why I would get a vaccine, because Jen is hoping and praying that these people on this airplane for 3 hours, and she's breathing in all this air. I mean, what would you do, Jen? What's your protocol?
Yeah, well, basically, now I do feel comfortable as far as the plane itself, because like you said, the air is recycled, but it's recycled approximately every 2 minutes. So it's not the air I'm concerned about. It's just the individuals themselves and them following the requirements of our company. Thankfully, I haven't had very many issues as far as the mask compliance is concerned. I have had, on occasion, I may have to ask someone, can you just pull your mask above your nose, or can you just make sure you leave it on unless you are actively eating or drinking? I've had maybe one occasion where I've had to call a Delta supervisor to notify them of someone who was not being compliant on multiple occasions. But for the most part, thankfully, people have been compliant, people have been following the rules. And I just, I feel like with my company, we are seriously enforcing these issues. A lot of people are aware that we do have a no-fly list. There's a no tolerance policy. If you continue to disregard the flight attendant's instruction, you will be placed on that list, and you'll either be on Greyhound, or you'll be renting a car to get wherever you need to go, because we're not here to deal with these issues. We're just trying to get you safely where you need to go. That is our number one priority. So thankfully, I have not had a lot of major issues with it. It has been a problem on some other, people's flights. I've heard a lot of stories about it. I've heard a lot of other airlines. There have been all kinds of fights and just different things of that nature. Thankfully, like I said, I haven't had an issue with that just yet. But yeah, I mean, we're all just taking it one day at a time. We do have individuals in my company who have tested positive, whether or not it happened on a flight, whether or not it happened in another, area, whether it was home, in the airport, or something like that. It is just unfortunately no way to know for certain, but my company is very good about notifying individuals who have flown with someone who has tested positive, and they take the necessary steps in that case to either quarantine that person, go have them tested, have them go get tested, things of that nature. So like I said, we just handle it one day at a time and just kind of take it from there. But Mehdi, I did want to ask you, you said that since you've taken the vaccine, that you will now be monitored for up to 2 years. That's what you were saying?
Correct.
Okay. Right. Okay. So now with
All
that,
not just me, that's anyone.
Correct.
So back to Dr. K's point, this isn't the normal, you just kind of sign like your flu shot, you sign a paper and put it in your chart. No, they wanted my name, they have my date of birth, and they actually, I actually received my vaccine and I administered it to over 38 colleagues today. I was scheduled as one of the vaccinators. And so we have to make sure all of your information is in the system. So I'm assuming that all the information, not I'm assuming, I know that information is now being pushed back through our EHR, or electronic health record, and that is going to be funneled to the CDC.
So that's actually similar to what's done, say, for instance, when you do any type of donation, as far as like I did a bone marrow donation back in 2010, and they followed me for several years after that, and basically called, text, email, just asked all kinds of questions about what was going on from the time that happened until, you know, several years later. So
yeah.
So this is the paper that I was going to share with you that today the CDC has actually come up with. It's actually called, to register, it's called a V-Safe, V obviously for vaccine, where you can log on. They're going to send updates. So once you are a person who has been vaccinated, you can also use, you know, technology is great, so they're going to use it, and you can sign up. And so that way they will send you any updates. So as Dr. K mentioned earlier, if there is something different, or hey, watch out for this, they will be able to communicate and text that directly to you.
Yeah, and the CDC.
Now, how big is your team, Medi? You said that you have a team under you.
My personal team is 60 plus individuals. My hospital is a 900 plus bed facility.
Okay, and on your team, do you know approximately how many have received the vaccine, or if they, you know, are you able to even share that kind of information?
I can, but with hesitancy. What I will say is this. Again, I'm not representing, full disclosure, not representing that. But what I will say, it is a highly disproportionate number of individuals who look like me, who said they were not getting it. The individuals who looked a little bit more like my sweater said that they were going to get it. And I'll just leave it at that. And who I vaccinated today, the majority of those individuals were not Black and brown individuals.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know Howard University Hospital staff said that they weren't getting it. So there was a news article about that in a hospital in Texas where the staff members didn't enroll for the vaccine. And so that hospital ended up sending their extras to surrounding hospitals for those that wanted it. But, and also just to say, the CDC is doing follow-up behavioral studies for anybody that's enrolled in this new vaccine study too. So they'll be reaching out, probably asking more so about, you know, because as Medi said, we can't, like, just even discuss the mental health implications of this pandemic would be like 2 or 3 more shows. Right. But just the one thing that I really just want to emphasize for those who are watching is that the reason why they had to fast track a vaccine, and I think that's what Jacqueline was asking, like, why, like, how did it get pushed through so quickly, approvals and everything like that. Yeah. And it's simply because people will not wear a mask. But what the public also needs to know is, even if you are vaccinated, you still have to wear a mask. Right. It doesn't exempt you from wearing a mask, from social distancing, or frequently washing your hands. When you go and get tested, you're only negative at the moment that you test.
Correct.
Right.
And that's what I have to preach to people. You may have a negative test from 2 days ago, but how many points of exposure have you been around?
Right.
And that's what I'm trying to get, especially being in Atlanta, trying to get the Black and brown people to see. Right. I preach this. I've been going into communities. I've been doing panels. You know, I get the videos of the clubs and the people at the park and all of that. And I was like, well, what Pfizer and Moderna should have done is gone to some of these clubs and enrolled those people, because those are high risk.
Right.
And they would have known without a shadow of a doubt whether or not the vaccine was like truly effective. Because, and then we also have to keep in mind that the vaccine is only had 95% efficacy. So there's still 5% of the population that the vaccine won't even work for.
Correct.
But isn't that, Dr. K, though, that number only exists because, to my knowledge, correct me if I'm wrong, Medi and Dr. K, that
You froze.
You're wrong.
You look like
Why
you
you freeze on us? You're wrong.
look like you sleep.
Young children, like
You know.
toddlers, have only a black.
You froze a
Right?
little,
I mean-
Representative
Froze.
Jackson.
Oh,
You
did I
froze.
froze? That
Yes.
we must be getting
Repeat
close
your
to the
question.
hour. We
Just
must be.
repeat your question again for us.
So correct me if I'm wrong.
95% efficacy.
Yes, because not everyone was studied. Like pregnant women were not studied. Toddlers,
Mhm.
like 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds were not studied.
No, that's not why, because they still had a representative population. Children are going to be excluded anyway because they're really not high risk. So Pfizer's vaccine, Pfizer enrolled like 168 16 and 17-year-olds towards the end of their study. So when they went for FDA approval, they dropped their age from 18 to 16 off 168 people, and they said okay. So it's not about because they didn't include children or anything like that. It's just based on, so Pfizer's study enrolled 40,000 people, 20,000 people received the vaccine, 20,000 people received the placebo. Moderna's study enrolled 30,000 people, 15,000 people got the vaccine, and 15,000 people got placebo. So all in all, only 35,000 people have, prior to the rollout to healthcare professionals, have received the vaccine in the studies.
Okay.
So it's just based on that. It has nothing to do with children. Now they are working on adolescent versions, but right now with children, because their symptoms aren't as severe, so they're carriers, but their symptoms are more similar to allergies or like a cold. So like a lot of parents, what we're seeing is that the parent may think that the child just has like, it's the weather change. I grew up in Southern household. Oh, the weather changing, she's just sneezing or whatever. But it could actually be COVID because it's not really like the death rates, unless they are in that population that are asthmatic or immunocompromised, where their symptoms would be a little bit more pronounced. But for the most part, including, even if they did include children in these studies, it would not have had an effect on the 95% efficacy. It's just based on the uptake of the virus in the participants. I mean, of the vaccine.
So there's talk of a strand that's supposed to be 75% more contagious than what we've previously known to be going on. Is it known whether or not the vaccine will have any type of impact on that particular strand?
So Pfizer and Moderna are actually doing the studies now, but if we go back in the US back to the summer, when we had our second peak, because we never flattened our curve in the US, we went down the roller coaster, and then we hit another hill, and that was our second peak, and that's when another variant of the virus actually peaked in the US. That was more virulent. It just didn't kill people, so it was more contagious. It just didn't kill people. So just from some of the articles and just some of the communication that I've seen, like on some of the calls, more than likely it's already here in the US. And so depending on when they can trace it back to when it hit, and I'm thinking, and this is just me, because when the UK flattened their curve and they were able to open up and be, go outside and be safe again, they got on flights. And so they probably came here, picked up a portion of that variant strain and took it back with them. And they're just now seeing it in the population. And so, and if I could just talk about how that's what happened in New York. So when COVID first hit, they closed the borders with Asia. Nobody from Asia is coming, because they thought that the people coming from Asia was going to bring the virus with them. But actually, the strain in New York, once they sequenced it, came from Europe. Yeah. Because you had all the people living in Europe or with dual citizenships that came back, and they all flocked back to where they live in New York, and they live where? LA,
California, yeah.
And so the New York strain that was so virulent and just like ran rampant had a European base. So there's a New York variant of COVID. Then it skipped to Chicago. Then Chicago had parts of New York's variant. and then it created its own. So pretty much the virus is going to be different wherever you live. That's why they say most cities, when you travel, they say, well, you have to be tested or you have to quarantine.
Quarantine for
Mhm.
You know what?
Okay.
Credit your various strain. And even just here in Georgia, we have, I think the last time I looked, maybe a week or so ago, it was like maybe 16,000 COVID positive people that were non-Georgia residents. They're number 5.
It's interesting that you haven't heard anything about Europe like that as far as it having come from. It's Asia, China.
Don't even get me started with that, because what we have not spoken about, Representative Jackson briefly touched on it, was leadership.
Right.
And people like him and others, and I'm specifically speaking of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, where I live here in DC,
Right.
where we have put people over policy and people over politics and politics over public health.
Right.
And I think, and I know that time is coming to an end soon, Jacqueline. And what I would say,
Oh, no, you're fine. Go ahead. Keep going.
to every individual is get the numbers. Here in DC, I personally believe we have one of the, obviously we're smaller, but we have one of the best. If you go to coronavirus.dc.gov, you can click on, as Dr. K was saying, which neighborhood. And Dr. K, you went to Howard, so you know, if you go up by Adams Morgan, if you go down Georgia Avenue, if you go over in Southeast, Southwest, she, meaning our mayor and our public health department, has done a fabulous, tremendous job sharing where these hotspots are. Also, I'm a nurse, I work in a hospital. What you need to be looking at, additionally to that, there's racial demographics that are there as well. So we don't need to be on this call tonight with all the things that we talked about. Get the information for yourself. Every single state. I had an opportunity to speak with Representative Jackson and another one of his colleagues a couple months ago when this all first kind of took place. And I went to the Georgia Department of Health. Click on that. Go to your county, see what the numbers are, find out what's happening in your specific area. And I'm going to give you a few things. One, for example, in DC, this was yesterday, there are 345 ICU, intensive care unit beds. There was only 56 beds available. There's 440 ventilators that we have currently able to use on a drop of a dime today. There was 198 that were in use. Okay. There's 238 people that were actually physically in the hospital due to COVID specifically. 79 of them are in the ICUs. So you may think that's a low number, but most hospitals don't have over 100 ICU beds or 200 ICU beds. The vast majority of people that are admitted into hospitals are medicine, surgical patients, et cetera. And again, I work at a level 1 trauma where people, and you know, Dr. K knows where I work. So people are helicoptered in from major accidents, you know, just like down there in Atlanta, you have Emory, you know, so whenever any big thing happens, I'm sure on 285, people go to Emory and they're helivaced in or what have you. So what you need to understand is all the numbers that I just gave you is there. So at the end of the day, when this conversation is over, go and get the information for yourself. COVID is not a hoax. I believe, and I will say this, Meady, personally speaking, and I'm not here to talk about whether or not I'm a Republican or a Democrat or independent or Tea Party. Our president, Donald Trump, did not do a good job of messaging what needs to be done.
Right.
Period. He did not. As scientists, you know, I'm a nurse, I'm still in the STEM field, Dr. K, that is what you do. Even nursing has a nursing process. You evaluate, you assess, you look at your outcomes, and then you create your interventions, and then you reassess again. And if it doesn't work, then you start all over. Dr. Fauci, 150% said at first, social distancing, washing your hands. I personally laughed at washing your hands because I'm like, who doesn't wash your hands?
Right.
All you out there in the public washing your hands.
Exactly.
You would be surprised.
Now you pay attention to it. Now you pay
Exactly. But Dr. K knows, and I'm sure you too, Jen, in your line of work, my hands are so dry. I mean, I'm sure my nails look nice, but my hands are so dry and cracked because I use so much Purell and all this hand sanitizer every single day.
Yeah.
Dr. Fauci made a very clear statement. He did say, listen, what we realize is we do need to wear a mask because we continue to study. People like Dr. K and Dr. Kizzy gave him more information. And so he pivoted. And so that's what you do when you're a scientist. You study things and you make the change. And because our senior leadership then politicized that, it did not take place. So then you have the left and the right and the people in the middle make those variations of their conversations with, now it's a political thing, which is what Representative Jackson talked about. So when you have people in his district, you know, why are you mandating this? It's my freedom. Well, your freedom is impacting my health.
Yeah.
How about that? So again, the beginning question an hour ago, that's why I took the vaccine, period. And so we continue to politicize. And I want to leave us with this one quote from Jim Rohn: treat your body like a temple, not a woodshed. The mind and the body work together, and your body needs to be a good support system for the mind and your spirit. And if you take good care of it, your body can take you wherever you want to go. Our body is highly adaptable, you guys. And with the power and strength and energy and vitality, you will need to get there. So at the end of the day, get your information, check those varying websites for public health, wherever it is that you work. Talk to me, talk to Dr. K, talk to your family members, people that you trust. And that's where you should get your information from.
I try to post daily. It hasn't.
Oh, that was so
cute. Yeah. So
You said good job.
For me, I have been on panels with some of everybody, the HU president, just trying to educate the community and say, okay, you can't let Facebook be your educator.
Right.
And so I put it out there. I've more recently now have been doing videos, y'all, and it's killing me because I hate being in front of the camera, but it's necessary because I found that people don't want to read what I'm writing, even though I'm giving them the graphics, I'm giving them the data, I'm telling them where to go for numbers in Georgia. But I get more interaction when I am speaking and I am in front of a camera. And so it's a means to an end. It's not anything that I prefer to do, but I am trying to help people get well. And by people, I mean the Black community, because we are behind the 8 ball. We had these issues before COVID. COVID just exposed just how bad they really are. And then when you add the technological divide with, you have households, multi-generational, that can't even go to a teledoc visit because they don't they don't have Wi-Fi, or grandma doesn't have, I was corresponding with a lady in South Georgia when I was working on a special project, and she was like, baby, I have a flip phone. And I was like, yes, ma'am. Okay. So I'm working with nonprofits because, people are saying, my Nana is sick and she won't go to the doctor and she don't know who to trust. Can you call her? So I'm like, yeah, give me her number. And I call her because I'm like, and I'm explaining, COVID to her and how things work. And I was like, well, Georgia has like this whole like telemedicine project that they got money from the federal government. And so you can go to your health department. If you can't come to Atlanta, your local health department can call your doctor and they can have a nurse be the hands and feet of the doctor. But people don't know that.
A lot of us are health illiterate too, Dr. K. And that's, again, you and I can have 10 conversations about this. So all this illuminates our inequity and inequality.
I'm a public health practitioner. It goes beyond COVID, and nothing against medical doctors, but that's not, your doctor isn't trying to help you be well. They're treating whatever you come into their office for. And that's where the public health portion comes into play, and it's so often overlooked in the community. But public health drives the community because that's where your interventions come. And that's where prevention comes. So you don't have to go to see a doctor. I don't have anything against medical doctors, but I want people to be well. I want people to be aware of how to get well so that they're not dependent on a doctor's visit or medication.
And there's a difference that people need to realize that, physicians practice medicine. And that's why I'm also so different with nursing. And there's a difference between health and wellness. Physicians are more so geared to health, which is the definition by World Health Organization is simply the absence of an illness. That doesn't mean that you're well, because wellness talks not just about your physical health, but wellness also talks about your emotional health, your spiritual health, and all the social constructs that impact all of that. And you have to think about all of this talks about where you work, live, play, and pray. And so those are those 4 things that we have to think about that make up the construct of how we are involved into our society, where you work, where you live, where you play, and where you pray. Hopefully we are praying at this point. But at the end of the day, we have to, as to your point, Dr. K, is that the pandemic to me is no different than what happened with when George Floyd happened. God bless his soul, and how that kind of ripped off the Band-Aid of what's really happening and the inequalities and injustices that take place within our criminal justice system and our society. You go back however many years it has been since Katrina. Katrina ripped off the Band-Aid by flooding a predominantly Black neighborhood and people sitting on roofs waiting for help. And I still to this day, because I go to New Orleans often, to this day can't understand why couldn't you have gotten a few cruise liners pulled up right down there on the river and got those people onto a cruise. I still don't know why that has not happened, but we're not talking about that tonight. So my point is that all of these things, COVID is just another sign and symptom. And I would be remiss, because I am a person of faith, what I do believe is that these are signs and times of inequalities and ills in our society, that my personal belief that God is kind of showing us some things that we have to do better to take care of our brothers and sisters. And even Steve Jobs on his deathbed, one of the most wealthiest individuals in the world, right? He did not have a cure for pancreatic cancer.
Nope.
And he died. He had so much money. He could have paid Dr. Kenyatta's salary, I'm sure, for years, given her generational wealth, but he did not, he couldn't do it. So at the end of the day, health and wellness is so important. It's at the very core of our existence. And we have to understand how everything we do impacts that. And this conversation is so key about COVID, but Kenyatta made a humongous illustration about Black and brown individuals being at the short end of the stick, because grandma, all of my family's from Georgia. So I have a huge affinity for Georgia. I'm a Georgia girl at heart. My mother and father are both born there. My family is down there in Telfair County, which is extremely rural.
Yeah.
My aunt had to drive 30 plus miles to the nearest hospital to deliver my cousins back in the day. My grandmother, God bless her soul, was a midwife and delivered nearly every single person in that town because the nearest hospitals were so far. The nearest medical center, like a Emory or something, you have to go to Atlanta, which is 2.5 hours away, Macon or Savannah. And so all of these hospitals are 2-3 hours away for a cardiologist, for kidney dialysis professionals, et cetera. So those people in your state, Representative Jackson, those are the people who are going to get the short end of the stick, not just because of COVID, but the other untold consequences of COVID. So people need to continue to talk about that. And Kenyatta, my sister, you and I have to use Facebook. We have to use whatever mediums that it is to share. So at least those 2 or 3 people who do trust you or do trust me or trust Dr. Jackson, Representative Jackson, to allow us to share their platforms, because unfortunately we are a technologically driven society. Can you, any of us, imagine if we don't have a cell phone? I mean, I remember in college, Dr. K, at Howard, I mean, I thought having my pager was the best thing. I paid $10 a month. And you had to
remember that.
people, like, call me 911. So you put in the 9 upwards and you figured out how to put the 1 in so they would call you right back. I mean, exactly. So, and that was, you know, and I'm 45. So I'm just saying, so it wasn't that long ago. And so we do have to use these platforms because there is so much information. There's so much information every day that is coming at us. People only have sound bites. Any marketing person will tell you, if you don't get your message out in 30 seconds, people have already gone on to the next. So you and I have to keep using these messages. We have to use Facebook as a sounding board and others, but at the end, still direct people, as you and I have both done, log on, get the information, go to Georgia, whatever it is, health.gov or whatever it is down there, click on your little community, Representative Jackson, send that information out to all your constituencies, because you are not a doctor, you are not a nurse, you are trying your best to make sure there's politics and policies in place to protect your public and your constituency. And that's what we have to do to get over this. And at the end of the day, wear the damn mask. Wear the
Yes.
mask.
That's
And
it.
stop- and then
Drop
for
the
those-
microphone.
Yeah, and for those who are waiting on a vaccine, if you live in a rural area, you won't even be able to get it because they don't even have the freezers to accommodate the Pfizer vaccine. So for those of you who think that like, oh, well, I'll just wait and I'm just going to do whatever, the rural counties are going to be the most affected. And I just want to throw out almost an equal amount of people have died of homelessness as COVID.
Yeah.
So let's put that out there too. Homeless people, the number of deaths for homeless people is almost equal to COVID deaths this year.
And we
look,
haven't even talked about domestic violence issues because all
Oh,
these
yeah.
people step in the house with these
Yeah.
crazy loved ones.
Yeah.
You know, the number of children that are the number of sexually abused children that are in the house with uncle so-and-so and cousin so-and-so and miss so-and-so. And these parents that are the majority of essential workers are Black and brown. That's a fact. So you're leaving your kid with other, I mean, I had a staff member one time talk to me about her leaving her 2-year-old, a former staff member, not where I work, but a former staff member at another place where she was leaving her 2-year-old with a 13-year-old because that's all she had to do because she had to work her shift. So who, a 13-year-old, come on, for 12 hours?
Well, can you please tell me what's going on in Chicago? That has nothing even to do with COVID.
No,
It's a wild, wild west out there.
and it might be, and you know what? Because some of the symptoms of COVID, though rare, have been the mental health where people have actually had mental health breakdowns. Like it, like I can't think of the correct term, but it's like they were literally walking down the street naked, like seeing things, like hallucinating. So those are symptoms of COVID as well. And the way that the virus is running rampant, it could just be some of them are experiencing COVID symptoms, and it is manifesting as the mental health.
I can understand the walking down the street naked, but let me see, I think I'm gonna go carjack that Lexus 500
because it's an opportunistic time.
Right.
And here's one of the ministers said on Sunday, and I think you all please write this down. He said there is safety and social isolation, but there is danger. I mean, there's safety and social distancing, but there is danger in isolation.
Yeah.
Safety and social distancing, but danger in isolation. So some people are acting as if, I mean, even if you're in your own home, no matter how nice it is, if you haven't left your house or seen your family member, that's like, can you imagine being in
solitary confinement?
Solitary confinement. So this has really put my mindset on even our criminal justice system of how inhumane it is to leave a person for more than a day or two in solitary confinement. And they're in a tiny room, let alone your apartment or your house. And so in Black folks, quite frankly, we are almost taught and raised to have mental issues, because 1 minute you're like, yes, ma'am, no, sir, everything is fine. Then I got to worry about my hair. If I'm okay with wearing a natural, if I can, hey girl, how are you doing? Because people don't realize, oh, you are educated. Oh, you do have a degree. Oh, you did graduate from college. Oh, you are articulate. But then just because I see Dr. K, hey girl, that's my bison sister or whatever, then the perception is different. So we're almost, I mean, the mental toll that plays, and we're all educated individuals with some level of, I would assume, social economic stability. So think about our brothers and sisters who don't. Dr. K has a PhD in molecular, I mean, blah, 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 right? I mean, that's phenomenal. Think about the person who doesn't even have a GED. And for them to have the mental wherewithal to filter all
and
this.
try to understand everything that's going on.
It's a lot. I struggle with it. So
well, it sounds like we already got our next 2 or 3 shows, y'all.
Yeah, we did.
Already got the topics. We already got the co-hosts. We already got the guests. We ready.
Look, we thought these politics were important.
Well, before you end, if I may, particularly for people, state of Georgia, like I said, I have such an affinity because my family is from there, is that Georgia does need, not just Georgia, but all of these rural areas. I'm from Pennsylvania, and truth be told, you guys all know Pennsylvania is very much a red state if it wasn't for Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. So let's be true. My county where I'm from is very red. There's Confederate flags that are flying in Eastern Pennsylvania. Okay.
Really?
Absolutely. Yes.
What city are you from, Meaty?
Easton. So it's 45 minutes outside of Philadelphia. It's Northampton
Okay.
County. So
Okay.
I'm from Pittsburgh. Okay.
what we need to understand is that for folks like you guys that are still there in the Georgia area, you do have to make sure that you have some outreach into some of those rural areas, because we don't know what's happening. Or those are the individuals that will end up suffering and not have, and quite frankly, they're the backbone of your entire state. My family are farmers.
Right.
I mean, 400 acres of land on my maternal grandmother's side were farmers and did so much just for that county. And so what you need to realize is that Black farmers, all those other agricultural things that take place down there, we need to get back to those Jimmy Carter peanut days and not forsake those small businesses out there in the rural areas that are feeding Atlanta, that are feeding Columbus, that are feeding Augusta, that's feeding Albany. So you can't forsake those individuals, because then you're going to say, where's all my food and why is the milk now, $10 a gallon? So at the end of the day, as I think you mentioned it earlier, Jen, that we just have to be mindful of all of these things that are taking place, because it all impacts all of us. And it's not just COVID. COVID, quite frankly, is just a symptom of a much, much larger issue. And again, I would be remiss as women of faith not to say that we have to take care. What we do to the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you're doing unto him. And so that's why I love nursing. I love, to your point, Dr. K, I love my physicians. My best friend's an ER physician. However, nurses, we're the ones that are sitting at your bedside for 12 hours. We're the ones that are administering the medications. We're the one that when you actually die and pass away that are holding your hand. We're the ones that are actually there when the baby is born and you got to try to get the baby to breastfeed. We're the ones that are there when that chemotherapy agent is infusing through your arm. We're the ones that are helping you get up out of bed. And so at the end of the day, find someone to help, to serve, to do good for, because that's what we have to do. And we didn't even talk about the economic impact. That's a whole nother conversation too. So we can go on forever.
Yeah. Well, guys, we're gonna have to do a wrap up. So Derek,
but there's hope. There's hope. Keep hope alive. There's hope.
Keep hope alive.
Get that vaccine or put the mask on and stay in the house.
And pray as if your life depends on it, because it literally does.
Because it does.
Listen, faith over fear, there's peace over pandemic, there's Christ over COVID, there's Jesus over juxtaposition, and there's love over lies. So we got to take care of each other.
And there's truth.
Love that.
Yes, all right.
That too.
Amen.
So Derek, give us a wrap up. Derek?
Yes.
Freeze, go ahead. Give us a wrap up, because we're getting ready to wrap the show up. So just go ahead and
Okay,
give us a wrap
listen,
up.
when you think about what all has been said this evening, yes, it is our point of view, but it's a view that can very well help our audience, and our audience go beyond Georgia, right? I mean, we have those who in other states that are watching our show, and we continue to bring content like this because, to the points of Meaty and Dr. K, information, knowledge, right? The Bible says, my people perish because of the lack of knowledge, not the lack of money, not the lack of food, lack of knowledge. And that's what we have done this evening. We're going to, looks like we need to have a part 2, 3, and 4 with Dr. K and Meaty, because it's all about information. And if we can do that, Jacqueline and Kat and Jennifer, then we have done what we were called to do. And that is to share information, create a network, so that way everyone can make the best informed decision for themselves and their family.
Brother, you might as well go ahead and close us out with prayer.
You got it.
Oh, there's music.
You get into our own voting. And Christmas is coming up, so happy holidays to everyone out
Happy
there.
holidays.
Merry Christmas, happy holidays.
Stay safe. Wear a mask. Social distance.
That's right. Bring your mask. Remember, guys, everything you heard and everything we said was our point of view. We'll see you next time. Next week, we're going to talk about